Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Welcome back, gang, and welcome to the second recording from the Break Magazine pre-Dakar event, which was in December 2025. In this episode, we are talking to Charley Boorman. Yes, the Charley Boorman. Charley attempted the Dakar in 2006, so we were very excited to speak to him for the first time. We didn't really need to interview Charley. We just needed to put him in front of a microphone and let him tell his stories. He's an absolute professional, and it was a great pleasure to share a stage with him and hear some of the backstories that you don't actually get to see in Race to Dakar. So yeah, this was a great experience, and I think you're going to enjoy this one. Right, let's get on with it. I haven't actually got an introduction written down for Charley because I think we all know who Charley Boorman is. He's from off the telly, and he did the Race to Dakar in 2006. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Charley Boorman to the stage.
Wow. It was very interesting the watching your film, Llel, from that spotty, crying little kid that I used to pick up in the bushes up in the Welsh mountains to now, and to make that movie. And as Patsy said just earlier, it's brought back a lot of memories for me. What made me laugh was that everyone in 1971 had the same problems that you had, and that the same problems that Patsy had, and the same problems that I had, and probably the same problems that everyone's having this one coming next. And so the problems sort of stayed the same, which is interesting. And the other thing that you guys were talking about, what makes him different to other people, and your father and you and you, Patsy, and sadly not for me because I didn't finish, but Simon and others always talk about it, is that there has to be a little bit of luck.
Definitely.
And you have to have a little bit of luck to run on your side. I remember for my crash, I was doing really quite well. I think I was running in the 80s on day 5, and I was fine, and went down into an old little riverbed, and was completely flat sand and clipped a rock. Went down really slow. I didn't let go of the handlebars fast enough and broke my hands. You could have that crash 1,000 fucking times and nothing would happen.
I don't think it's a little bit of luck. I think it's a lot of luck. I think everyone here that's been to Dakar has had that crash that you got up from and went, whoa, how is my body still in one piece?
You think about that a lot, and you think about the money. I mean, I shat myself because we'd spent a lot of money, like everybody does, and we had a film crew, and we had people to give us a lot of money, and I'm sitting there looking at my hands, and I'm thinking, fucking hell. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to give the money back, and I've spent it. So that was my incentive of getting back on the bike and finishing the day. I think I had another 400 kilometers or something that day. I do remember getting back to the bivouac, and it was Africa. So we had these amazing doctors, 56 doctors and nurses, 10 helicopters, 20 aircraft. I mean, it was endless. They fed about, 1,500 people a night, a 3-course meal with wine. But it was extraordinary. I remember turning up at the doctors, and I hadn't dared take my gloves off because they were looking quite big. And Simon, your father, was going, yeah, you'll be fine. It's just a scratch. Anyway, I went to see this doctor, and he was this French guy, and he says, oh, Charley, poof, it's pretty disgusting. And he said, I don't think you can race a Dakar anymore. He said, I don't even think you'll be able to wipe your own ass. And he was wrong. I could get a baby wipe on this finger, and I could just reach round. So that told that little fucker, a French guy, telling me what to do.
He's a perfect podcast guest, isn't he? Because we just have
He's actually answered all my questions before we started.
It's funny. Did you get this, Patsy, when you're riding along each day, and there must have been like 1,000 times a day that I'm thinking, fuck this, I'm finished. I'm not going to do it anymore. Fuck it. I mean, what's the point? I mean, who gives a shit? I mean, no one gives a fuck if I finish. No one gives a shit. Nothing. And I'm thinking, why? Fucking idiot. And then I go to the next June. And then I got up to the next June, and then I'm thinking, why the fuck am I doing this again? Don't understand. And then I thought, right, that's it, I'm done. And then I'm looking around, and I realized the only way out is to finish that day. So you have to have to ride out. So then you get in the day, and then there's always there was the same guy was always at the end of each.
Yeah, looking very happy
and really excited that you're there. And he'd stop, and he had a little cloth, and he'd wipe the dust off your goggles and pat you on the back and say, "You
Was he an official or just some guy?"
No, he was the official finisher. And he was so nice, and almost made me cry each time. And then you look at your road book, and you've got another 200 kilometers to ride to the bivouac, and you're thinking, "Fuck's sake!" And then sometimes the track is just as bad as the race bit, and you're thinking, "Wow." Anyway, lots of swearing. So there you go.
Anyway, Charlie, my first question.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Before we start, would you like to tell us about quad lock?
How many people have a quad lock here?
It worked.
You nearly didn't make it to the start line even because you had the accident in Abu Dhabi where you broke your collarbone. Was it ever in doubt that you'd make it to the start line, or did you have a plan B for that perhaps?
But the collarbone, I mean, it was a moment, and I remember I was with a guy, and I was out of my depth, and I think that was day one of 10 days training, and we went to these fucking huge dunes, and I just went over this one. He disappeared, and he stayed on the bike, and I went over the top and just cartwheeled. I remember getting to the bottom, and I jumped up, and this thing was sticking up. And I kept going over to the guy and going, look, it's not broken, is it? And he's going, well, I think it is. And I'm going, no, it can't be. I remember then we were in the middle of nowhere, and so I jumped on the back of his bike, and we rode, I think, for about an hour and a half. And I'd strapped my arm up to try and keep it still. And we rode. I sat in the back of his bike for an hour and a half, and finally got onto the road into a petrol station. But that was awful, actually, that hour and a half city. You know what? I don't know if any of you sat in the back of a motocross bike, but there's no pegs. There's nothing. You're trying to hold on. One arm's not working, and it's baking hot. And what's interesting, when you're in the sand dunes, depending on what time of day it is, the sand changes. And so, like, early in the morning, the sand seems a little harder. And then heading towards the middle of the day, it starts to get fluffy.
Swallow you up.
And then that's when I fucking broke my collarbone and sat on the back of this guy's bike. And then we got back. I went to hospital, X-rays, back on the plane the next day. And I think Simon hadn't even come out. He was a day late, so he missed the whole thing. And this guy who rode me out, they went to hospital with heat stroke and dehydration.
But you said in the film that you had a sense that everybody wanted you to fail.
I think so. It's very difficult when you come off the telly, you know, having done that thing with Ewan. I was doing the Dakar Rally, and everyone thought that I hadn't earned my right to be there, or a lot of people did. And so I felt like I was back when I was 16 years old. I made a film with my father called The Emerald Forest, and I had the lead part, and my father was the director. And I had the same feeling where everybody on the film set was looking at me as if to say, you know, you've been sleeping with your father to get this role, which technically was true, but. But you know, that feeling of having to prove yourself and having to prove to yourself that you could do this. And Etienne from Dakar, he's the organizer, but he said, "Look, Charlie," he said, "it doesn't matter who you are. If you can get to the start of the race, then you've won already, because to get there is harder than really doing it often." So that was a big thing. So not finishing, I took that by heart.
Getting to the start line is definitely harder in some respects.
Yeah, I think so.
Than actually the riding of it. You have to go through so much. So, yeah, anyone that just gets to the start line is a hero, really.
In some ways, you have to qualify. I mean, I got a little lucky. Very difficult to convince them to allow us to film it. And we needed their help. I needed my number to be in the helicopter so that they would film us. If your number was not on the helicopter, you didn't get any footage, or you got lucky to be filmed with cameras on legs in the desert. But then the fucking cameras on legs, they were just danger zones. You would sit there and you'd be riding like this, you know, fucking knackered. And then you see the camera on the legs and you'd be going, whoop, oh yeah, here I go, this. And then I started to realize the only reason the camera was there because there was some fucking disaster just on the other side of the camera so they could film it. And then you go down the dip and there were, 20 other motorcycles just lying there, all going, that fucking cameraman. It was a double-edged sword, that was.
Do you think you went in fully prepared? In hindsight, did you know what you were kind of letting yourself in for, or do you think you didn't try and do it again, I'm assuming?
Well, I went up and did Long Way Down with Ewan afterwards, and that was a better gig. So, sharing, a tent with Obi-Wan and his lightsaber. That's a joke, by the way. And no, this tattoo is not a lightsaber, just in case anyone thinks it is. It's just a spark plug. But what was the question?
Do you think you were properly prepared?
Oh, yeah. I don't think so. I don't think anyone is for the first one. Because the thing is, when people tell you stories about adventures, they tend to sort of make them more dangerous than they actually were. And then when you start talking to people who did the Dakar Rally, they tend to dumb down the stories because they are so fucking awful. I mean, we joke about it a little bit, but there is an attrition rate that people don't often talk about. And it's it can be 2.5 people a year on average don't make it. I was very lucky after the crash. I was very lucky to be able to stay, to finish doing the Dakar. They don't want injured people on there. They don't want the responsibility. We really had to convince them that and when they were putting my thumb back in place, Russ was going, don't say a word, just make out as if it's not that bad. And so I was sitting there just trying to keep dumb. So I stayed, and then I started flying on the airplanes to get to the next bivouac. Every morning I'd go and wait for my plane, and there would be 3 or 4 mostly motorcycle riders lying on stretchers in a bad way, like Patsy was, or, they had dislocated bones, broken legs. I mean, you name it, it was all there, and they were all being ready to be flown home. And so no one really sees that in the Dakar Rally. You look on Eurosport and you see the American guy, the great mustache, by the way.
Used to be in the Village People.
I was thinking YMCA when I was there. I was thinking he's more the kind of builder.
Well, that's what I said
guy.
to Llel. I said, you dress up as a construction worker, I'll be the Indian chief when we interview him.
I don't want to be part of that. I've seen Llel naked, and it's not great.
And was the pressure for you to stay around because of the film?
Well, I wanted to because Simon and Matt were still in there, and I wanted to tell the story. The story needed to be told. And actually, in fact, I think if in hindsight, if you look back at it, I think it kind of made the race to Dakar a little bit better.
Yeah, it worked really well.
Because if all three of us had gotten through, we'd never really filmed the background and what happens when you crash and the emotions of that and stuff like that. So I suppose it worked out, and it was fascinating. Claudio von Planta, who's been on so many of our adventures together, he was one of the first people to interview bin Laden, and he came back and kept trying to tell everybody this guy was a nutter and they should get rid of him, but no one listened. And then he came from being in Afghanistan. He was this war correspondent. He was in the desert with the rebels and hanging out and really dangerous stuff and bullets everywhere. And then when he came onto the Dakar Rally, he goes, "This is the hardest thing I've ever done."
Show of hands, who's seen Race to Dakar? Who's watched it more than 4 times? Yeah, me and you, brother. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's absolutely brilliant. Watch it, and it's available on YouTube.
Do you know, it was lovely to be part of that, and it was lovely to be part of Patsy. And yes, she did fucking wave goodbye as we were. I mean, our bikes were shit. I mean, they were absolute shit fucking 650 tanks.
You did disappoint me. I'm not sure if I've actually ever told you this, Charlie. And it's only you talking, it's come back to me. But on the 4th attempt, it didn't actually all go swimmingly. My front sprocket sheared off, which is another story. And I ended up being towed by my teammate Zippy 60 kilometres in the sand, which even to this day, I cannot explain how fucking awful it was. If you can imagine bike to bike being towed, it was like that for 60 kilometres.
I'm really nervous now.
We finally, after many hours, got to the finish. I can't even remember actually how we got back to the bivouac now, but I remember thinking, God, it'll be so good. Charlie will be waiting for me. It'll be great. He'll be there. He'd fucked off to bed. I've got 2 broken wrists, haven't I? I've just been towed 60 kilometres and you weren't even there.
I'm so sorry I was out and you were still in, And it was great to be part of Patsy's being able to finish. And I like to think it was mostly because of me.
Obviously.
it was lovely, the first British woman ever to do it and stuff. And I do think that Britain, I think it's a real tough one to be a Dakar rider. I think that you get Sam Sunderland, who's now won it, 2 or 3 times? He's won it. But I remember the first time I had this rant with all these different newspapers and BBC and people and saying, well, what, you're talking about someone who came third in the car, and you've got first British rider ever to win it, and there was nothing about him, and I felt so ashamed that all they wanted to talk about was fucking football. I was really annoyed about that because I know how difficult it is, and I can only imagine what it's like to finish.
One day, Charlie.
Why did Team Race to Dakar pick Llel's dad, as he's now known, to do all the training and the riding with? What was it about Simon that you thought would be great for your team?
Simon Pavey, we met him. He'd just come back from the Dakar, had broken his collarbone, one of the many times he'd failed. Other people do fail as well. Ewan and I were doing a BMW training day and deciding whether or not we'd have BMWs or KTMs.
Well, look what you've done to fucking KTM now.
I know, what a PR fuck up that was, eh? And let's not dwell. They're doing so well. Simon was there and he was training us and stuff, and he'd mentioned about the Dakar Rally and stuff like that, and we did Long Way and the Long Way, the first one, and Ewan and I used to always have these sort of Dakar moments. We'd be riding along in the desert in Kazakhstan or somewhere and some fucked up road, and as you were saying, Llel, there were bits which are sweet and there were bits which are bad, but as long as you have a couple of sweet bits, you're always back in it. And so we'd have these moments, and Ewan would come on the walkie-talkie and say, oh, Charlie, I'm having a Dakar moment. And I'd watch the Dakar a lot in Ireland. It's very popular in Ireland, the Dakar Rally, and it was always on telly, and I kind of grew up with it a little bit, and obviously I rode dirt bikes a bit and stuff. And I was thinking about doing the Dakar, and Simon was the only person I knew who had done it. I went and asked him about it, and he said, sure. It was a bit more difficult than that. A
related question to Llel, actually. It was lovely to see your family who are here tonight supporting you again, wishing you good luck and saying goodbye at the start, and they were at the end to wish you, the team, congratulations. Llel, where were you?
What, when Charlie did Dakar?
Yeah, with your dad. Where were you?
I was helping him at his Hare and Hounds by filling his bike up with fuel. Going, why won't you finish, Charlie?
Kimvara, my 2 daughters are here. I remember Kimvara told me the story about when we were in Lisbon and we were getting ready to go somewhere. They'd gone to do with my wife and your mum. We were going sightseeing, and I was in the hotel room with the road book, freaking out because I'd never seen a fucking road book before, and it was just reams of paper on the floor.
How did that get left so late that you hadn't looked at the road book?
Simon Pavey. Anyway, so Kimvara told the story. They were all trying to pile onto this bus, and it was packed. As the doors closed, someone pushed Llel off the bus because there wasn't enough room, and the doors closed, and off the bus went, and he was left behind. I shouldn't laugh. It was always very amusing when Llel, lost it on the mountain when we were riding. But he was amazing. He'd have a hissy fit. A few tears, get back on the bike and carry on riding, and you were made of good stuff.
You've met my dad. There wasn't a choice in that matter because we were stuck somewhere I didn't know how to get home from.
I was crying as much as you were. I was just crying inside because I didn't want Simon to see any sort of chinks in the armour.
I was only a kid.
Do you appear in the film? I looked out for your sweet little face.
Yeah, I'm in it a few times, like the back of my head or some annoying kid running around.
Looking like Jedward. You often talk about your dyslexia. Did that make the road book even more difficult?
I don't know my rights from my left, so I wrote left and right on my hands so that when I looked, I could see what left and right was. It was difficult, but, numbers have never been that difficult. The hardest thing in the whole thing, I think, is and the most dangerous bit is actually looking down at the road book. And I think you'll see a lot of riders who have big crashes just look down a little bit too long, and you look back up again and you've gone 4 or 5 lengths into a corner or whatever it is, and it's already too late. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that I think Patsy and Simon kept mentioning is that they said always ride at around sort of 85-90% so that you've got just a little bit in your arsenal to if something does come up, at least you can blip the engine and the front will come up. Well, sadly, that didn't work with the fucking BMWs that we were riding, but it's over there, and it was more like you would blip it, and about half an hour later something would happen. And but the worst thing is that I can't remember who it was, one of the factory riders at the beginning came up to me and he said, "Oh, this is your bike, Charlie." And I think he was foreign, I can't remember. And he said, that's a heavy bike. And I said, yes, it is. And he goes, "Here, have a go on mine." And it was this KTM factory bike, and I rode up that I just wish I'd never been on it because it just ruined the Dakar Rally for me because I got back on mine.
Do you still own this bike?
Yeah, that one's
And
mine.
do you ever ride it? Do you ever start it? Never start it?
No, too many good memories. I do remember once in the safety briefing, do you remember you'd have to go through all those little modules to get things stamped? I remember waking up to applause in the safety briefing and I'd slept through the whole thing. So I thought, fuck it. Doesn't really matter. I mean, what's going to happen? The first day in Africa, Matt has a big crash and he split the petrol tank. On these petrol tanks, you can, not like your one, you could split them so that one side was broken, you'd still have fuel on the other side. Anyway, so he's on the floor and he's moaning about his leg. And I come running over and I've left my bike over there and I'm coming over and I see this petrol running out and I put my hands like this and I'm holding the fuel and then I'm walking around and I'm thinking, well, where am I going to put this fucking fuel? And I just sort of dumped it on the ground and thought, well, now my fucking hands are full of fuel. This took about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get the bike back together and walk over to my bike. And I can hear this, Monsieur Boorman, Monsieur Boorman, are you okay? And I'm thinking, fuck, I've only been in the desert one day and I'm hallucinating. And I'm looking at the rocks and there's quite a nice voice. And I'm thinking, I don't know where that voice is coming from. And and then I realize it's my bike talking to me, and I'm thinking, and I'm going, hello? And she goes, Monsieur Boorman, are you okay? This is race control. And then I remembered being woken up by clapping in the safety briefing, and I'd obviously missed that bit.
Tell us a little bit more about Matt Hall, because I've not been able to find any information about him. Obviously, he was a cameraman. And
well, Matt had come along to do the filming and stuff like that. Was a good rider. I don't think he realised either what was in store. Then he had a pretty tough time. He crashed out at the point where, like you did, Pats, and he got stuck in the desert and stuff like that. You know, once you crash, they don't really give a shit about you, really. You know, the sweeper truck comes along, and the sweeper truck is like the Grim Reaper. You know, you're sitting there and you're going, don't get overtaken by the sweeper truck because he's just going to take you. And then he slaps that bike in the back of the truck and he just ratchets them all up to all the other bikes. And you can see bits of the bike just bending and stuff like that. And then unceremoniously, and then you're stuck in this little washing machine to be ridden out. If you get lucky enough to be in.
Never ended up in it, Charley.
Yeah, did you never happen to you?
No.
It never happened to me because, you know, I made it to the end of the day, unlike Matt didn't. But anyway, but that's another story. And then they unservice mine with this crane, just lift them up and just like that, and that's the end of your Dakar. So it's a complicated place.
With Matt, I think it's kind of hard sometimes to get a sense of it in the TV show, but Matt is a really good rider. Like, he was a good expert enduro rider. Not the best, but not a very capable person. And I think it really showed it in the show between you and him. Like, he struggled with the emptiness and the vastness and the scale of North Africa. I think until I've never been to Mauritania, but you look at the footage of those tiny dunes that no one can ride through. And I think you ride that whale that you guys went on. I think it's one of the things that I find quite interesting. You made a joke about it, but like, you rode to the end of that day and when you broke your wrist, and it was 400 Ks with broken hands. That's not a normal thing either. We talk about Skylar Howes, but like, you really learn a lot about yourself in that environment. And,
well, I thought if you got to the end, I'd seen another guy go into the thing, and he'd had something wrong with his left hand, and they put a cast on it, and he held the handlebar, and it went hard, and then he carried on, and I thought, well, fuck it, I'll do that. I think you invest so much of your life into it. It, as you say, absorbs your life. It took over my life for a year and a half, and it was tough. The learning curve and the unknowing of it all, and not knowing what to expect, and everyone's telling you what to expect, but you don't know it until you've done it. I think for Matt and for all of us, it's something that will live with you forever. I mean, I've done lots of TV shows, and I still think, you know, for me, the Dakar Rally is still the one that I'm most proud of. You know, getting everybody together, getting to the end of it, and everything that could have happened in that year for us. And then we're pretty very lucky that we were one of the last few to do it in Africa, which was the original race. I mean, it's just as good in South America. It's great now, but there's a privilege and a sense of achievement for just making it to the Dakar Rally, because the top half of the Dakar Rally go back again and again and again, and the bottom half, if you're lucky,
might have one chance
to have a space and to be able to qualify. You're lucky. So there's only small, tiny handfuls of people every year get to do it. The three of us here have been lucky enough to do it in whatever part and how much it's taken us, but we've still been lucky enough to be able to do it. So I feel very privileged. I feel amazed about the organisation of those people and what they do even now, and it's changed, but back then and how they think of everything is incredible. And it's always for the competitors. They're always thinking, how can we do it better for the competitors?
To go on that same point as well, when we did the research for the film, I uncovered a lot of really good stories about those early years. You talk about the organisation. The first year, when they got into Algeria, they didn't have any food for 3 days because no one had thought that they would need catering. So a bunch of the riders got together. They found a local who'd killed a deer, and they bought the deer off him and paid him to cook it because there was no food. And it was only the second year that they went, we need some catering on this event of 200 people in the desert. And then they started to solve that problem.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't do it then.
Thank yous to Neil and Joe and Simon as well for their workshops earlier on. And a massive thank you to Llel for organising this.
Yeah, well done, Llel.
I just want to say this event isn't just me. You know, it does take a lot of people to pull this off, but also my girlfriend Lucy puts up with a lot of shit. There's been...
There we go. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed the evening, and I think most of the people there enjoyed it too. A massive thank you to everybody that was involved in the organisation, and especially massive thanks to Charley and Patsy for coming up and doing that. Both fantastic guests, really good sports. And it's great to meet them both. They do say you should never meet your heroes, but sometimes you definitely should. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.